Welcome to Tactical Talk. This is Zain. Many people in our political framework have made various statements about the presence and intentions of ISIS in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Most of these statements are drawn from incomplete briefings and misunderstandings about operational matters by the people advising the government of Pakistan. Today we've asked Khalid Muhammad, the author of the best-selling book Agency Rules and one of Pakistan's analysts on counterterrorism, to take us through the ISIS mentality and ideology in the region. Welcome to our show, Khalid Muhammad. This is Zain Khan. Welcome to Tactical Talk.
It's always great being with you, Zain.
Khalid, let's talk about ISIS in the region to begin with. ISIS Khorasan has emerged as a force within Afghanistan and has made attempts to recruit disheartened fighters from other jihadi, extremist and terrorist groups. How will this affect the security dynamic in the region?
I think we're looking at a major security problem here. Before the dynamic we had in the region, we had Al-Qaeda and the Taliban working within Afghanistan and making sure that Afghanistan stayed peaceful for whatever time frame they needed. Again, that was post 9/11. Since ISIS has come forward, they have decided to take the place of Al-Qaeda, and Al-Qaeda is not even half as brutal as what ISIS is. The problem we need to be careful of is what they're trying to do in Afghanistan is very different than what they're trying to do in Pakistan. And we need to be very clear what they're doing in Afghanistan because they're signing up a lot of the Northern Alliance partners. They're signing up a lot of the people that were never pro-Taliban to begin with. And with Gulbuddin Hekmatyar joining up with ISIS, it's going to create a very serious strategic dynamic for us on the Pakistan side.
Khalid, our domestic and regional media have said a great deal about ISIS potential or perceived influence in Pakistan. Do you agree with the media narrative?
I don't. I think the problem with our media is that we're looking at ISIS as being what we're seeing as a manifestation in Iraq and in Syria. So we're looking at every terrorist organization that operates in the region as being another form of what we've seen in the past. With ISIS, we're looking at something very different here. They're not looking to govern Pakistan. They're not looking to govern Afghanistan either. What they're looking for is a support base. They're looking for people to fund, for facilitation, and for finance. They are not looking for fighters here. And to understand that the mentality behind this is that they're using Pakistan as a stepping stone to other countries. Whereas in Iraq and in Syria, they're actually looking to govern. They're actually looking to set up a state. And that model is very different than what they're trying to do in Afghanistan, what they're trying to do in Pakistan. So whether I agree with the media or not, I think the media is misinformed as into how they're reporting this. They're very concerned about who's operating where and what they might be doing. They're not actually talking about what ISIS is doing. If you remember, about 8 months ago, there was a 38-page document found inside of FATA that was the ISIS battle plan for the region. And ISIS's one and only concern was causing a fight between India and Pakistan that would bring the U.S. into the fight. Because they know they can't reach the U.S. on U.S. ground, so they need to bring them into a conflict someplace where they can face the U.S. fighters face to face. They were hoping to do that in Iraq, but it didn't happen. They were also hoping to do it in Syria, it didn't happen there either. So now they're looking at Pakistan and Afghanistan as the potential battleground where they can bring in the United States forces and fight them face to face. So we need to make sure that what our media is reporting is actually what's really happening on ground and not the things that what the media would like us to believe as to what's going to fit their narrative rather than what is actually the mentality behind the extremist groups that are moving into the region now.
Looking at Iraq and Syria, ISIS seems to have a different plan for Pakistan. Can you help our audience understand those plans?
Sure. Again, ISIS's mentality for Pakistan is not to govern. The view they're coming in with is that we want supporters, we want financiers, we want people that will carry our ideology forward. What we've seen is in certain parts of Pakistan, in southern Punjab, for example, in FATA, in KPK, we've seen people start raising the ISIS flag with the belief that the government's failed, the TTP failed, the Taliban failed. Maybe ISIS is the answer. Maybe they're the government that we need for Pakistan to sort out the issues. And that's a very deadly game to be playing because we've seen what happened with the TTP in Swat. They came in with a very friendly message. They got their footing established. Once their narrative was in place, the brutality started. And when we look at what ISIS has done in Iraq and in Syria, they are a brutal organization. They're not interested in fighting from the point of view of spreading Islam in any way, shape, or form. There was also a story that came out in the media today, in the international media, that a few of the ISIS commanders in Afghanistan said we weren't fighting for ideology, we were fighting for money, which fits what the TTP model was. That was not an ideological war. That was a paid mercenary war. And we may actually see the same thing happening with ISIS here in this region as well. So the designs are very different for this region with Khorasani as compared to what we see in Iraq and in Syria. There, they're looking to govern, they're looking to take control of territory. Here, they're looking to be a force that carries an ideology and pushes forward. I'll give you an example. Jamaat al-Dawa has lost a huge number of their fighters in Balochistan to ISIS. And when they lost those fighters because these people decided that Jamaat al-Dawa wasn't going to carry on the jihadi fight they wanted. So they lost their fighters to ISIS, and now ISIS is carrying on a fight of their own.
Khalid, where do you see ISIS drawing core support in Pakistan and Afghanistan?
Well, traditionally we've seen these jihadi groups and the extremist groups drawing from southern Punjab, the Fatah region, and parts of Karachi. Now, the understanding behind this is that southern Punjab already has a large number of jihadi groups operating there, and those same jihadi groups had opened camps inside of Fatah, right next to the TTP. So you'd have a TTP camp, you'd have a Lashkar-e-Taiba camp, you'd have a Jaish-e-Mohammed camp, and they just keep running down the line. So they were all working together, but as far as anyone was concerned, they were all separate groups. So when we talk about where they're going to get their core support from, Jamaat al-Dawa, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Jamaat al-Athar, Lashkar-e-Islam, these two have already been signed up with ISIS from the very beginning. Because they were on the outs with TTP, they said, well, we need somebody strong that we can stand behind, and ISIS gave them that opportunity. So we need to be very careful as to who's going this way and where they're going to take us, because we're going to see this go from a jihadi war into an ideological war inside of Pakistan, and this is going to be a very dirty fight.
Khalid, last question. Can you connect all pieces from the Taliban and Al-Qaeda to TTP and ISIS?
Sure. It's a beautiful roadmap when you look at it. When you go back to the 1970s, when the Russians invaded Afghanistan, the creation of the Mujahideen was a natural force, a resistance force that was created to fight the Russian invasion. After the Russians were defeated and they were pushed out of Afghanistan, the civil war that became part of Afghanistan had to be controlled in some way, and that's where we got the Taliban from. Now, the Taliban, being that they were only accepted by two countries outside of Afghanistan as a formal form of government in the country, meant that they had financing issues. They had issues running the country. They had issues coming up with money. And that's where Al-Qaeda stepped in. They said, look, give us a home. We can't stay in Somalia anymore. We can't stay in the Horn of Africa anymore because we're now being bombed by US missiles. We need to move someplace where we're safe. And to them, that was Afghanistan. And as long as Afghanistan stayed on its feet and nobody caused any problems, everything was great. The whole dynamic shifted after 9/11. 9/11 gave the world a bouncing point to come after Al-Qaeda inside of Afghanistan. We know there were a number of problems with the Taliban, with the international community, and that gave them the ability to say, okay, we can take the Taliban government out, we can take out Al-Qaeda, and we can make Afghanistan peaceful. I can't count the number of countries that have believed that, going into Afghanistan and thinking they were going to make Afghanistan peaceful. But the problem that is created is that you gave Afghanistan a president who actually believed that he could create strategic depth inside of Pakistan, and that's where the TTP came from. I'm not saying this is something that I've heard. This is something that Hamid Karzai said as president to the New York Times, that we created the TTP inside of Pakistan for strategic depth. So we could make Pakistan listen when we wanted to negotiate with them. When you connect all the pieces, you see that this mentality started in the 1970s and has rolled all the way through until 2015. And the change that we've seen from the Mujahideen to Al-Qaeda, from the Mujahideen to the Taliban to Al-Qaeda to the TTP and now to ISIS. It's such a dramatic shift because we went from pure fighters to savvy media people that understand how to get their message out, how to get the idea out and get people to believe in what they're teaching. That is very deadly for us because this is a model that no one in the world has ever sat down and looked at and understood how they're putting this narrative together, how they're convincing people, and how they're getting people on board with them. If we don't start to understand how ISIS operates or how terror organizations operate in today's day and age, we're going to find ourselves on the back foot fighting a war that we cannot win. And it's going to be our own people that pick up weapons again, just like they did with the TTP. Again, this is a money issue. This is not an ideological issue. They framed it as ideological, but it's all about money. So we need to understand that we've gone from a mujahideen that was fighting for control of Afghanistan from an occupying force, to a playground for every jihadi group and for every terrorist group to come into Afghanistan and say, well, look, we'll take this land here, we'll take this land here, we'll take this. Let's divide up Afghanistan. And from there, we'll start to see where we can move to. And the fear that we've got on the Pakistan side is that all of these groups are now operating there. If Afghanistan becomes too small for these guys, they're obviously going to look at Pakistan then. And we, with nuclear assets, with strong military, with very good conventional weapons, we can't afford another fight like we had with the TTP. So we need to be very careful what happens now in Afghanistan. And I think this is where we need to put our focus at.
Thank you so much, Khalid Mohammed, for being on Tactical Talk. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Zain. It's always a pleasure being on the show with you.
This was Khalid Mohammed, the author of the best-selling book Agency Rules, and also an expert on counterterrorism and counterinsurgency. Until the next episode of Tactical Talk, this is Zain Khan. Take care and goodbye.